In the national government allocation of 2.35 trillion Kenya shillings, 1.6 trillion goes to the recurrent, even as 750 billion Kenya shillings goes to the development. The consolidated funds, CFS, that is Consolidated Fund Services, gets 1.21 trillion Kenya shillings. The equitable share to counties will be 400.1 billion Kenya shillings. Judiciary, 23 billion Kenya shillings. Parliament gets 43 billion Kenya shillings. And the revenue targets, a conversation that we are now at, will be 3.4 trillion Kenya shillings, including the ordinary revenue of 2.9 trillion, and as well the appropriations in aid of 441 billion Kenya shillings. Now to Honorable Tom Odege on the revenue targets and the conversation on the Finance Bill 2024, before we rope in Ruth Kinyanjui, who is an economist.
Thank you very much. You'll allow me 1 minute to respond to what my colleagues have presented in the screen there. As members of parliament, we have a responsibility to ensure that all Kenyans are safe and they are not exploited. You cannot dangle development to us so that we allow you to exploit Kenyans. That one, as a member of parliament and a representative of people, we are going to resist that. You cannot tell us the money is coming for development so that when you are taxing our people, we keep quiet. And even that development, you have not come out clearly to tell us how it's distributed all over the country. That one, I think, is a cheap way of trying to twist MPs to support something which is not good for Kenyans. On our revenue targets, this one I said and I want to repeat. We should come up with the targets which are realistic and achievable. We don't set our target so high when we know very well whatever we have in place is not schemed towards achieving the targets which we have. Because like now, you set a target of 4 point something trillion, then now trying to dangle around to see how you can achieve this money, you now start floating tax on each and every item to help you achieve that. And as much as you expand the tax net to Kenyans, what you are forgetting, if you reduce money in the Kenyans' hands, we will still not be able to achieve that target, because the target will only be achieved when Kenyans are spending. But if the spending rate of Kenyans is reduced, you will still not achieve that target. So what we need to do, how do we make Kenyans have floating money so that they can buy, and when they buy, you collect money. So at the time you are collecting money, you should also make the collection be something which can free flow, not something which is forced on people to come up with money. Finally, I still want to repeat that the best way of making us to achieve whatever we intend as a country is first to cut on wastages, reduce corruption, and the top leadership must also reduce their appetite for expenditure. And that one would mean traveling, hiring unnecessary support staff, and these kind of luxury which we are seeing around must be reduced to enable the expenditure be within our limits. But what we are experiencing today, I think, is too much for the country.
Well, let's now rope in Ruth Kinyanjui, who is an economist joining us live from the US. Good morning, Ruth. We have a 4 trillion budget that will be unveiled today by the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. What do you make of it from an economist perspective?
Thank you so much, Chacha. I think the main problem here is not even the budget that is going to be unveiled today. That's not the problem. One of the biggest problems that has been we have been dealing as a country is the disparity between those who have and those who do not have. While at the same time, it is expected that people are going to pay the same kind of taxes. The disparity not only is so impunitive for the people that live below a certain kind of a level, but it's very punishable, you know. And just the fact that we cannot be able to balance properly the haves and have-nots, I think the tax policy then doesn't become equal. It doesn't help the common Kenyan It doesn't help the government. As much as the government is going to continue finding gaps of where they can be able to tax Kenyans, if we do not continue addressing the whole gap, the disparity between those who have and those who do not have, then we are going to continue creating the confusion that we are seeing in the country today. Even as we continue anticipating for budgets, as we continue anticipating for a good Kenya, there is no way a good Kenya is going to be seen. It does not matter the amount of budget. The Ruto'S analysis needs to be addressed and looked into, so that a proper policy can be implementable, it can be fair, it can be justifiable, and it can serve both the government and the common mwananchi, Chacha.
Well, and the 2.9 trillion revenue targets, ordinary, of course, targets, just comparing what we have right now, the budget committee was forced to slash, or the treasury was now forced to slash the targets of this current fiscal year by 250 billion Kenya shillings. How attainable is it that we have even a more raised target of 2.9 trillion, yet the one that we had currently has not been attained?
And that's the thing. If planning is something that is overlooked, it's a foresight for a short time or even a long term. And if we can see there's a lot of forecast, and we are not addressing actually the previous issues that have been there, especially on budgetary issues, it means there's something that we are missing. I remind you, Chacha, planning or budgeting is a process that we look at where we are coming from, where we are, and where we are going. It is something that needs a lot of thought about, and it's something that actually affects or needs to show how we've been performing previously. If we've been having forecasts and actually supplementary budgets like we have been discussing, we discussed a few months ago, and if we have been having attainments that maybe KRA has not been attaining, then where is the problem? What are the issues that the Treasury is having even in planning for the country? There's a big problem. We can say there's a big problem. As much as there's identification of areas that the government is finding out or like identifying that it's going to fill some of the gaps. But how implementable are those gaps? How long will they take to turn around? And I'll give you an example, Chacha. For example, for the housing levy, we saw it took into the courts more than 11 months or around 11 months. When will that income ever come on board? So does it mean that the people who are planning are also lying to the government, or they're not giving the right information, or they're not giving the issue on the ground? And that is why we can say then the tune on the top and the rhythm at the bottom, really there's a disconnect. And if that all is not addressed, it does not matter what is slashed or what is not slashed. Then we are going to continue having the same perennial problem and saying that some budget was not achieved, it's not going to be achieved. Then the government will be constrained because there was an expectation that was not met from the economy. So all these checks and balances need to be brought together so that we can be able to, at least to balance the country, and we can be able to be realistic to ourselves and to the citizens that we serve. Chacha.
Honorable Lote, the current conversation on the finance bill 2024, 302 billion is targeted, of course, through that particular bill. And there is an uproar of various clauses being, let's say, the most contentious one, the 2.5% motor vehicle tax, the 16% VAT on bread, among others. Should the committee now amend and, let's say, scrap of those clauses, then it means the 302 billion target will be already slashed, and let's say we'll be talking about 210 perhaps. With the fiscal deficit now at 609 billion Kenya shillings, will it result to this expanding further?
Well, thank you. I think I'll say what I have said again on studio, that when a government is coming into being, they come with a manifesto and with an aspiration what they want to do to the people. And when every campaign is taking place, every of the competing parties will tell people what they want to do. And the reason why, if you go to Parliament, the leader of budget, the chairman of the budget committee and the chairman of the finance committee is actually from the ruling party. because these are people that take interest of the past of government, how the past is resourced and how the past is expended. So if there is a public participation, the public participation does not by itself announce what the government has been thinking. I'll tell you this without a blink. The public participation is only to listen to the views of the people at to the level that these views of the people is in tandem with the aspiration of that government. And the reason why we've been complaining that public participation, despite it being in our constitution, is not listened to. It is because the government has a particular direction. And so I'll tell you, this public participation might not amount to much as long as it will hurt the aspiration of the government in place. And so let's not expect too much changes. Let us not expect that they are going to throw these things out, because if they throw it out, it basically means that they are not going to meet their objective and that they are not going to meet to the needs of their agenda, which they sell to Kenyans in 2022. This is what I'll say. The issue to deal with bread, the issue, the 16% to deal with bread, and somebody said the cost of bread is not going to go up. Why? Because the previous government gave subsidies to the millers and to the bread producers, and they expected that these subsidies are going to be transferred to the people. But what happened is that the producers of bread and the millers then enjoyed the subsidies without transferring that benefit to the people. And so the government had thought, do we continue letting these millers and the producers of bread continue enjoying, or will then tax it? And I think the taxation on bread is not meant to increase the cost of bread, but to ensure that government gets revenue which is being lost to the producers who are enjoying it without transferring that benefit. And so for me, I'll say there are things that we might sensationalize and say, oh, they're increasing the cost of bread. Let us first of all charge the people that have been given the responsibility of transferring a reduced cost of bread to the public, and yet they're enjoying it. So the government is removing that so that the cost of bread remains the same, but the people, the millers and the producers of bread now pay this, this that they are supposed to. And so we will not see much of the changes. We will not see a lot of this public participation and public aspirations coming into this budget. That budget that the government has targeted, I think, will be collected.
Honorable Robert Basil, I understand you are to travel to the constituency, yes. And I'll allow you to leave. I'll hold you just a bit. Now that the Finance Committee has retreated to prepare a report, which will be tabled on Tuesday next week, and the voting will take place on Thursday, do you have hopes that the views of Kenyans will actually be put into consideration, and a failure to which, what actions will you be taking in terms of voting?
As I've said it before, I want to make it very clear, explicitly, that myself in Parliament to represent people of Yatta and more so Kenyans who are currently suffering. In a situation where the Finance Committee will not take into consideration the issues coming from Kenyans, more so in regard to telling them no to introduction of new taxes, I'll not shy away from standing with Kenyans and telling the Committee of Finance that myself and others, we will be able to move amendments based on the punitive taxes that have been introduced. And in principle, we are not doing that because we don't love our country. We love our country. I've said there are better ways to collect more revenue without necessarily increasing taxes. And I gave reference to employing technology to bring sanity on road transport, where instead of having human element to collect money in form of bribes, we can put technology to be able to harness this avenue, collect more resources to support development agenda. But when we say that the only option we have is to increase taxes, myself I say no. I said it in 2023, and you saw the repercussions where KRI was not able to meet its target, despite ignoring our voices when we told them don't increase new taxes. So next week, I'll make my voice heard on the floor if I'll be given the chance. And then on the voting day, I'll stand with the Kenyans as I've always done. So count me in. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Honorable Robert Basil. He is the Yatta Member of Parliament who has joined us this morning for the conversation of the Finance Bill and as well the Budget 2024-2025. Of course, safe travel to the constituency. Well, let's now get to Ruth Kinyanjui. About 108 out of 120 stakeholders in the manufacturing, telecommunication, edible oil, banking, and digital sectors have opposed the Finance Bill 2024. Now that the Finance Committee has retreated, how do they strike a balance in terms of financing the 4 trillion budget that we have, and as well the targets set, of course, for KRA?
If you look at the last 2 years, I think, and even regionally, I think one of the things that has been very difficult is doing business in Kenya. It has been very expensive, and most of the multinational, when the or multinationals, and Kenya